Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Hamas officials say they have rejected a new US Gaza ceasefire plan that has been backed by Israel. The US proposal would have seen Hamas handing over 18 living hostages and the bodies of dead hostages in exchange for a 60-day truce and the release of Palestinian prisoners. Meanwhile, Israel says it has intercepted another missile from Yemen with air raid sirens heard across parts of the country. Elsewhere in the Middle East, Lebanon's health ministry says 2 people have been killed in separate Israeli attacks despite a ceasefire. US President Donald Trump can keep collecting import tariffs after a federal appeals court granted the White House a temporary suspension of a court order blocking them. The US Court of International Trade had ruled that Trump overstepped his power with the sweeping tariffs. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of another deception by holding back a peace memorandum. The US says that Putin should take a Ukraine peace deal, as Russian officials say Ukrainian drones have damaged a hospital and homes in the Kursk region. A US federal judge has extended a temporary block on the Trump administration's attempt to bar international students from enrolling at Harvard. Billions in federal funding has been cut from Harvard amid an ongoing dispute between Trump and the university over alleged anti-Semitism on campus. Police say that 53-year-old Paul Doyle has been charged with 7 offences after 79 people were injured at a Liverpool Football Club trophy parade. Doyle faces 6 counts related to grievous bodily harm and will appear in court later today. A former assistant to music mogul Sean Diddy Combs has told a New York court that she was repeatedly sexually assaulted during her 8-year employment. The witness, who testified anonymously at the sex trafficking trial of Combs, said she lived in fear of his violence. French President Emmanuel Macron has met with Singapore's President Shanmugarathnam during the final leg of his Southeast Asia tour. Macron is set to speak at the Shangri-La Defence Summit later, with several defence secretaries, including Pete Hegseth, set to attend. We start this hour in the Middle East. The White House has said Israel has accepted a new US-backed ceasefire proposal for Gaza. The plan was put forward by President Donald Trump and his Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. According to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, Israel signed off on the proposal before it was submitted to Hamas.
I can confirm that Special Envoy Witkoff and the President submitted a ceasefire proposal to Hamas that Israel backed and supported. Israel signed off on this proposal before it was sent to Hamas. I can also confirm that those discussions are continuing, and we hope that a ceasefire in Gaza will take place so we can return all of the hostages home, and that's been a priority from this administration from the beginning. I won't comment further as we are in the midst of this right now.
However, it's been reported that Hamas officials say the group will reject the proposal as the latest terms fall short of its demands, including an end to the war, troop withdrawal and unrestricted aid access. According to sources, the plan calls for a 60-day truce with 2 phased exchanges of living and dead hostages for Palestinian prisoners. Meanwhile, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is said to have discussed the ongoing efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza in a phone call with Hamas Political Bureau officials and Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister to discuss the developments in Gaza. Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned that Israel's decision to approve 22 new settlements in the West Bank pushes efforts towards a 2-state solution in the wrong direction. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric reiterated calls for Israel to halt all settlement activity, describing it as a major obstacle to peace and development. The settlements were announced by hardline Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, despite warnings from allies threatening targeted sanctions. He said that the settlements will be located in the north of the territory. Britain, France and Canada have called the plan a direct threat to the viability of a future Palestinian state. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict and wider region is Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst who is joining us from Taipei. Ross, let's first explore this new US proposal. Israel says yes, Hamas says no. Why do you think Hamas has taken this stance, considering they themselves said that they'd agreed to a very similar deal that was an initial Steve Witkoff proposal from some time ago?
The issue for Hamas is the proposal lacks a guarantee that hostilities will come to an end. There's no commitment by Israel to stop the war. So even if this ceasefire lasts for 60 days, at the end of that period, the war might resume. And this is a condition that Hamas finds unacceptable.
Yes, Ross, let's look at some specifics of this deal. I want to correct myself from the beginning of the programme. It will be 10 living hostages and the bodies of 18 dead hostages. Given the ongoing situation as well in Gaza with humanitarian organisations talking about famine and starvation, how important is it for both sides that a deal is agreed as soon as possible?
For Israel, they want to reduce the negative publicity and the ill will. Recently, specifically in Western Europe, with the denial of food aid or the very limited amount of food aid that has entered Gaza in recent days. So although that negative publicity or pressure from outside of Israel, it doesn't really change how Netanyahu proceeds with fighting the war. But I think Israel at some level is sensitive to the criticism, even if they don't want to admit that they are. So resuming large-scale shipments of food and medicine into Gaza, it certainly would help alleviate some of the PR problems that Israel has. I mean, for Hamas, they are nominally still the government. They have an obligation to see that the people are fed, and they don't want their own people to be mad at them. And we've seen some protests by Gazans against Hamas. There are some people who blame Hamas for the war and blame Hamas for the conditions that Gazans are now living in. And Hamas is sensitive to that. So they also want to see a resumption of a larger amount of food aid.
Yes, and Ross, along the bottom of the screen, we've got some further information about this Israeli potential settlement in the West Bank. There has been condemnation from a few countries talking about it limiting the possibility of a two-state solution. Why do you think some Western nations have decided to shift their stance against Israel in relation to not just these settlements, but also the ongoing offensive in the Gaza Strip?
Well, some of these countries have long opposed Israeli settlements in the West Bank, so they're being consistent with their past policies, and they are willing to be openly critical of Israel when Israel does announce expansion of settlements in the West Bank. So there really isn't anything new there. When it comes to their criticism of the war in Gaza, I think it's just based on the ongoing humanitarian situation, and they do have domestic pressure as well. There are periodic protests in those countries. So it's been a long and slow process for some of those Western European governments, but given the food situation, they're more willing recently to be openly critical of Israel.
Yes, Ross, you will be staying with us. We're going to also stay in the Middle East, as Israel has said that it has intercepted a missile fired from Yemen after air raid sirens sounded across central Israel and explosions were heard over Jerusalem. The army confirmed the missile was shot down before reaching its target. Well, Yemen's Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility. Let's take a listen.
نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية استهدفت مطار اللد المسمى إسرائيليا مطار بن غوريون في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخ باليستي فرط صوتي. وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وأجبرت ملايين الصهاينة المحتلين على الهروب إلى الملاجئ. ووقف حركة الملاحة في المطار.
Well, this is the latest in a series of attacks launched by the Houthis since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. The Houthis have repeatedly targeted Israel over the war and in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Moving on now, a federal appeals court has temporarily reinstated the most sweeping of President Donald Trump's tariffs just a day after a trade court ruled that Trump had exceeded his authority in imposing the duties and ordered an immediate block on them. President Trump lashed out at the Court of International Trade's ruling, calling it horrible. The White House slammed court ruling and expressed confidence that it will prevail in an appeal. Let's have a listen to the US press secretary.
President Trump is delivering on his promise to fix this problem, and he has taken a long overdue and much needed bold stance for American workers after decades of our manufacturing base being hollowed out. The president's rationale for imposing these powerful tariffs was legally sound and grounded in common sense. President Trump correctly believes that America cannot function safely long-term if we are unable to scale advanced domestic manufacturing capacity, have our own secure critical supply chains, and our defense industrial base is dependent on foreign adversaries. 3 judges of the U.S. Court of International Trade disagreed and brazenly abused their judicial power to usurp the authority of President Trump to stop him from carrying out the mandate that the American
Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, spoke to reporters after the president won temporary reprieve. The appeals court ruling preserves his sweeping import duties on China and other trading partners for now. Let's listen in to those comments.
The tariffs remain in place. The court told us, they didn't all but tell us, they told us go do it another way, so you can assume that even if we lose, we will do it another way. And I can assure the American people that the Trump tariff agenda is alive, well, healthy, and will be implemented to protect you, to save your jobs and your factories, and to stop shipping foreign wealth, our wealth, into foreign hands.
On Fox News Channel's special report, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent commented on how America's trading partners continue to negotiate in good faith despite the court's ruling. Let's have a listen.
You know, we have not seen any of that in terms of our trading partners. They are coming to us in good faith and trying to complete the deals before the 90-day pause ends. So we've seen no change in their attitude in the past 48 hours.
And lastly, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said 3 trade deals are nearly complete and that more agreements are expected. Well, joining us once again to discuss the latest development in Trump's legal dispute over his Liberation Day tariffs is Ross Feingold, political risk analyst in Taipei. Ross, this temporary reprieve against the ruling from the International Trade Courts, what's the significance of this ruling, and is it going to just be temporary?
Significance of the appellate court's ruling is that it allows the tariffs to continue to be in place. And in fact, it would allow Trump to adjust those tariffs as negotiations or deadlines come up. So it's pretty much maintaining the status quo, or in other words, it's maintaining the authority that President Trump has been using over the past few months to impose tariffs or to pause them, to enter into negotiations with other countries, and possibly to raise those tariffs back up to the Liberation Day amounts. How long this will take is really a mystery. It has to go to the appellate court, and then whoever loses in the appellate court is going to appeal to the Supreme Court, which may or may not take the case. If they do take the case, then this is going to go on for a much longer period of time.
Yes, absolutely. We heard Scott Bessent there talking about conversations that are ongoing with nations over trade. Of course, Trump said this was his aim with his Liberation Day tariffs. He wanted to force global trading partners to the negotiating table. But with this court ruling and court action hanging over, will this give the other nations more leverage in their negotiations with the United States?
Not at the moment. First of all, as we've discussed, the appellate court put a pause on the Court of International Trade's ruling. So the higher tariffs and those deadlines are still very much in play, and other countries have to deal with that reality and negotiate with the Trump administration. In addition, as Peter Navarro said, the Trump administration is going to be looking at what other possible legal basis may exist to raise tariffs on foreign trading partners. So the possibility exists that they will find another legal basis to raise tariffs. And again, foreign trading partners of the United States have to be working within the confines of the reality that there might be other legal basis for raising tariffs. So for the foreign trading partners of the United States, they have to be very careful, and they should not assume that tariffs are not going up. They should still operate on the assumption that they do need to negotiate new arrangements with the United States.
Ross, Trump and his administration brand him as this deal maker, the businessman, the art of the deal. How embarrassing is it for him that these court proceedings are ongoing and potentially putting a mark on his policies that he's been so strong with and hasn't taken any sort of relief on that against criticism from other people within the country?
It's not the first time that the Trump administration has had a setback in the courts, whether going all the way back to Trump's first term in office or more recently over the past few months and across various issues. So I don't think it's personally embarrassing for President Trump and the to impose higher tariffs on trading partners. And those trading partners are still looking to make a deal with the United States. So I think Trump is still in a okay position here because we do have many dozens of countries are trying to negotiate new trade deals for the United States, which ultimately will probably be good for the United States. It will allow the United States to export more to those countries. It might result in additional investment in the United States by foreign companies. So pending the result of the litigation or what other bases Trump might find to raise tariffs, I think he's still in an okay position.
Yes, Ross.
Partners.
Yes, sorry, Ross, the signal there was a bit weak. But just to bring an end to this discussion, of course, this could escalate further. You mentioned the Supreme Court there. Do you think that this block will go through? And if so, what will the ramifications be on Trump and his policy with foreign trade?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the entire question, but if it's with regard to trading with blocs like the European Union, it looks like the EU is serious about making a deal. And I think a lot of other countries are looking at the likelihood of the EU or other major trading partners such as Japan or the UK making a deal. And it means even smaller countries like Taiwan, where I am, for example, they also very much want to make a deal with the Trump administration.
Absolutely. Ross Feingold, as always, thank you so much for joining us and providing insights on a couple of topics there. We will, of course, be across all of those developments in the ongoing legal dispute over Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. But we now move to Europe and tensions flare again on the Russia-Ukraine border. Ukrainian drones struck Russia's Kursk region overnight, damaging a hospital and apartment buildings and injuring at least one person, according to local Russian officials. Russia says the town of Kursk was targeted by a swarm of drones, with debris shattering windows at the city's main hospital. Meanwhile, across the border in Ukraine's Sumy region, fierce clashes continue. Authorities say several border villages have fallen under Russian control. Moscow has openly declared its intent to create a buffer zone in the area. In the east, Russia claims to have captured 3 more villages, including in Kharkiv and near Pokrovsk, a major target in its slow push westward. Ukraine has not confirmed these gains, but reports over 50 attacks in the area over the past day. The front lines remain fluid, with both sides claiming control in different sectors. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accuses Russia of deception for failing to deliver a peace memorandum ahead of possible talks in Istanbul, scheduled for June the 2nd. He claims no one, including the US or Turkey, has seen the documents. Moscow says it's ready for talks, but Kyiv insists Russia is stalling with unrealistic demands. Trump and Turkish President Erdogan still urge dialogue. In a separate development, the US told the UN Security Council that its 30-day ceasefire plan in Ukraine is Russia's best possible outcome. Ukraine has already agreed to the terms. Russia, however, insists that certain conditions must be met first. Acting US Deputy Ambassador John Kelly warned that if Moscow continues the war, Washington may pull back from talks and impose new sanctions. Let's listen in to the acting US alternate representative, John Kelly.
Trump has made clear we want to work with Russia, including on this peace initiative and an economic package. There is no military solution to this conflict. The deal on offer now is Russia's best possible outcome. President Putin should...
Well, the White House says President Trump, now in his second term, is determined to end the war swiftly. UN's Rosemary DiCarlo says hope in Russia-Ukraine talks is just barely alive amid a surge of large-scale drone attacks. Diplomatic efforts continue despite no ceasefire being agreed. Kyiv demands tougher pressure, while Moscow denies stalling. The UN urges immediate ceasefire talks, stressing peace will take time but cannot wait. Moving back to North America, a federal judge in Boston has extended an order blocking the Trump administration from stripping Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. The move comes amid escalating tensions between the White House and the prestigious Ivy League school. Judge Alison Burroughs said a preliminary injunction is necessary while legal proceedings continue. The case unfolded as Harvard celebrated commencement with its president praising graduates from around the world. The administration has launched multiple actions against Harvard, including freezing billions in funding, investigating discrimination claims, and threatening to end its tax-exempt status. The Department of Homeland Security has accused Harvard of ties to violence, anti-Semitism, and Chinese influence, claims the university denies. Nearly 60% of students at Harvard's Kennedy School come from abroad. Meanwhile, Washington is also moving to revoke visas for Chinese students in key fields, sparking fears of a brain drain. Harvard calls the actions a direct attack on academic freedom. Staying in North America, a former personal assistant to Sean Diddy Combs testified in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The assistant, identified as Mia, stated it was impossible to refuse Combs' demands. She testified that she worked for extended periods without sleep at his instruction. Mia, who was given anonymity, described incidents where Combs shouted at her and allegedly threw a computer in anger. She also accused him of sexual assault on multiple occasions. She indicated that she felt unable to resist due to his influence and feared damage to her reputation if she refused. According to Mia, Combs' power was such that even law enforcement appeared unable to challenge him. She noted these events occurred prior to the #MeToo movement. Combs is charged with racketeering, sex trafficking, and transporting individuals for prostitution. He faces life imprisonment if convicted on all counts. He pleads not guilty and denies these charges. His defence team acknowledge his past behaviours and unconventional sexual conduct. We head back to Europe now, and a 53-year-old man has been charged in connection with a vehicle crash that injured dozens during a Liverpool Football Club Premier League victory parade. The man, Paul Doyle, faces 7 offences. Let's take a listen.
Heard from our CPS colleagues. The man arrested by Merseyside police following the incident on Water Street has now been charged with 7 serious offences.
Doyle faces charges including dangerous driving and multiple counts of causing and attempting to cause grievous bodily harm with intent. Police say Doyle drove into a crowd, injuring 79 people, 7 of whom remain hospitalised. Now identified as a local businessman, father of 3, and former Royal Marine, Doyle is set to appear in a Liverpool court later today. Authorities have ruled out terrorism, calling it an isolated incident. Heading to the Indo-Pacific region now, French President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Singapore for a two-day state visit to mark 60 years of diplomatic ties between the two countries. This visit is the final stop in his Southeast Asia tour, following trips to Vietnam and Indonesia. Macron will be welcomed with a ceremony at Parliament House and meet President Tharman Shanmugaratnam. He will also hold talks with Prime Minister Lawrence Wong to sign agreements on defence, AI, transport and legal cooperation. The two leaders aim to upgrade their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership focusing on digital economy and multifaceted cooperation. Macron will also deliver a keynote at the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue, Asia's largest security forum. He is accompanied by senior French ministers and officials. Previously, Macron secured major deals in Vietnam and Indonesia, including Airbus plane sales and military equipment agreements. Let's listen in to the French president.
We are opening a new phase, a new era of this relation with a stronger partnership, and we are very proud to be the first European countries to precisely have this level of partnership. But everything is about trust. And I think the trust we have is precisely the fruit of this very long history, but the fact that we have a very strong alignment of our view regarding the global order, a very strong alignment between our views regarding a possible future, and a strong alignment regarding our own interests. And from security issues, economic partnerships, from sustainable development and artificial intelligence, the spectrum of the cooperation we have, and clearly the magnitude of the ongoing partnerships is very impressive. So I'm extremely happy.
We move on now, and the United States plans to increase weapons sales to Taipei to a level that will exceed President Donald Trump's first term as part of efforts to deter China amid heightened military pressure on the democratic island. Well, that's all we have time for. We'll continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.